Hello, Innovate 2024. I'm Kat Hollins, and I am the client trainer here at Capture Higher Ed. I've been with Capture for about 3 years now, but this is the first time that they're letting me moderate one of these panels. So hopefully you enjoy your time. It is my great pleasure to moderate today's panel, A Seat at the Table, the evolving role of marketing in higher education. Because this is a panel interview, I really want you to remember that there is the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So this is your time to really be able to spend some quality time getting those questions answered from some really great experts from a lot of different institutions that work with us here at Capture. So I definitely say use this time, use that Q&A. We will monitor those questions. So our guest today, we are very excited to have a great group with us. We have Leanne Hughes, who is the Vice President of Enrollment and Marketing at Illinois Wesleyan University. We have Paula Gower, the Associate Vice President of Marketing and Communication at Oklahoma Baptist University. And last but certainly not least, we have Vince Rico, the Head of Marketing and Communications at Fordham's Graduate School of Education. I am very excited for you guys to get to speak with the three of these individuals because we've already been having some great conversations. So welcome, guys. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. Oh, look at these beautiful faces. Hello, everyone. Hi. Well, we're going to kick it off. Just really first question about marketing so that everyone's juices can get flowing. I'm going to start with you, Leanne. And we're going to start out with how has the role of marketing in higher education evolved in the past 5 years? And what are those new trends that you're observing?
Oh, that's such a great question, Kat, and thank you for allowing me to be here. I'm a longtime client of Capture, and so it's been sort of a fun adventure to go through the changes in the marketing landscape over the last 5 years together. And I would just say off the top, remembering 5 years ago and before, really what we were focusing on most was that comm flow and thinking through those print materials and who received what and when they received it. And then sort of the rest of my job was working surrounding the website and making sure that the website had everything. And then that sort of morphed into the digital landscape and, making sure SEO and all your analytics and your pop-ups and your toasters and all of those things are working correctly. And I think the latest thing that I'm seeing and really trying to be on the front edge of course, we have AI and how to use AI. We're using it strategically as a way to push students from that inquiry to application stage, at a stage where we know that they don't necessarily care if they're talking to a real human. In fact, they may prefer the fact that they're not because of sort of the trends of Gen Z and Gen Alpha coming up behind them, the way that they interact with people. And it becomes more about the relationship when they're a little bit further down the road. So I would say that is a big one for us. And then secondly, I think the direct admissions opportunities that are out there, and this variety of platforms and making sure that your marketing messages are up to date and where they need to be, has created another level of work for marketing directors to sort of go through that with whatever platforms, even if you're not using direct admit, through that. An example of that would be something like maybe niche, making sure that your profile on there is looking the way that you want it to be. And then, it's so funny. I was at a conference back in the day with Capture in Louisville, and I remember when Steve Huey was back in the day when he was around. He asked me a question: "Do you think you're ever gonna not print a view book?" And I said, "I can't imagine not printing a view book." And guess what we did last year?
No more view
No
books?
more view book. We took our money for the view book and put that toward digital advertising and geofencing and Google AdWords and using more of what Capture can do for clients, rather than using something in print, and tried to reallocate those resources so the things that we are printing are really almost more for the parents to sort of push along the student, and the digital becomes a little bit more about the student themselves. So that's kind of, from my perspective, how things have changed.
I definitely want to dig in a little bit because we have been hearing for what, year, 2 years now, everyone terrified of AI. So can you tell me a little bit more about what that process is? What do you really need to be worried about, perhaps, to someone that has not bought into the AI portions yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to really be selective with who you're allowing to represent you with an AI product. And like anything else, don't launch it until you feel that level of comfort and you've tested it out yourself. And so the process we went through was really amazing. They conducted a series of interviews with us on campus, and then it scrubbed our website. And so when they would do interviews with us, we would ask the hardest possible questions we could think of and make sure that it was generating that sort of information back. So I think it's something you do have to be careful about. And there's a lot of people getting into that space. So just making sure, if there's a way to make sure that whoever you're working with that's doing that for you really understands your institution, and is not just trying to, give cookie cutter answers to some of the basic questions that students would be asking at that stage of the funnel.
That's really good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Uh, and then on the other side of that, I'm really excited to have Vince with us today because Vince, you're in marketing for a grad programs right now. So we here at Capture, graduate work is something that we're kind of digging into at this point because graduate level students, they're harder to reach. They're harder to figure out if this is the right place. So while kind of our undergrad marketers are looking for Gen Z, Gen Alpha, you're kind of in this space of like still millennials. Are we headed to Gen Z at this point? Like, what is different kind of in the graduate space of what's going on and trending right now?
Sure, perfect. Thank you for asking that. And it's good to mention any questions that might be headed my way. I'm a great generalist, and I can speak to. I used to do K through 8. I was a school principal for a few years, so I've learned through that, and then here the sort of differences and nuance in recruiting and how it works. Um, Our target demographic currently is 27 to 35. We have a lot of PhD programs as well. How that changes, intuitively, I have very little contact with happily, happily, very little contact with parents. And a lot of the time I'm meeting students at their work. Part of our geofencing, like Leanne has mentioned, we're a graduate school of education, and so I'm targeting education workers. Fordham is faith-based. We provide a tuition reduction for any faith-based school workers. So I just provided to one of our partners, a list of 3,000 schools nearby where I think that our LinkedIn and paid social is going to be the most effective. But I guess I don't know if that's responsive to your question, but I specialize here in this space. Graduate level, and then where I could also speak at any point would be just digitalization in general, and then leveraging AI tools. We do a lot of human AI hybrid content production, creating some SOPs for that, and it's all brand new. I mean, who would have thought a year ago or a year and a half ago when I started? I was at Teachers College. Now I'm at Fordham. First couple of weeks, I started to use AI, and I thought, oh, this is going to save me a little time, but it's made me 60% more efficient. And so whoever's not yet bought in, it's coming, whether we like it or not. And it's just a matter of, as Leanne was saying, how can you leverage this effectively, making sure that it's representing your brand appropriately, testing it. But yeah, I think we've integrated it, and I think that's really good for the graduate level space.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you. And just to get Paula to get in here and give us some information, you're kind of more of our mid-United States university. So is there any differences that you see when from Oklahoma Baptist in comparison to, Vince's in New York? Are there different tactics that maybe you guys use or something you haven't heard from anyone else?
I think the tactics are pretty similar throughout the nation. Even everybody's online, everybody's on digital. The competition on digital has just grown significantly over the last 5 years, particularly the last 10 years. I was thinking about my budget and how it has moved, and Leanne mentioned this with her print publications, how my overall ad budget has moved from traditional advertising, I'll call it, to digital. Not everything has gone away, but I would say it's totally flip-flopped in the spend, 20/80 to 80/20, maybe 75/25, something like that. Because it's so much more targeted in its approach to reaching specific students. We used to call it spray and pray
Yeah,
kind of
that sounds so
advertising,
familiar.
because it's going to everybody, right?
Yep.
And you're just hoping that it's reaching the right audience. And the thing with digital is you can hone in on that audience, just like you were talking about geofencing and using your own curated lists of targets and retargeting the audiences who have been to your website. So I feel like most of the tactics are pretty similar. I think probably where some of it changes up is it maybe in messaging a little bit. But I think the three of us are faith-based institutions, and so we all have that in common. So some of that is very similar, I'm sure, but I think tactics wise, it's pretty standard.
Okay. That kind of just brings me into, I was just thinking, because we're all from like this faith-based here on this panel today. And on top of that, all three of you have said, digital and AI are happening and they're here. So if you're utilizing more of that digital, and Paula, I know that Oklahoma Baptist really uses that digital, how in the back end can those data analytics be helpful moving forward with other things? Or how do you use them just in general?
Yeah. And that honestly, that's part of the move, I think, to digital. It provides a little bit more accountability and a little bit more information, a little bit more ROI information, because I mean, I don't know about you guys, but budgets aren't just growing in significant ways, and is less of an undergrad population. And we're competing more even for grad students. So it has to, our budget dollars have to be attributable to enrollments, and to where's the money coming from, and is our spend effective. And so a lot of the data analytics that we're getting specifically from Capture, and of course from our GA4 instance and all of that, is vital to making decisions about where to place money, about what is most effective as far as advertising goes, and in reporting back to the board and to president's cabinet, to my president in particular. We're just very, very accountable for each of those dollars. And Capture really has been a huge help to us for that accountability piece and for that reporting and data analytics. So it's been great.
I'd love to hear that. I thought I saw, Vince, you looked like you perked up. I didn't know if you had something to add to that, but we did get our first question from the crowd.
I might have sarcastically perked up when she said that budget numbers weren't just growing.
Oh, yeah. I think we all were like, ha ha, no.
No.
Yeah, so that's a big part about digital, right? Like, at least you can say at the end of the year, like, yeah, we spent this, but look what it did. And we never had that with direct mail. It was like, did it get there?
Did it get
Did
there?
they just throw it out with the penny saver? Like, all of those pieces. So we're able to really kind of tailor it at that point. Okay, so our first question says, I love the idea of communications with greater curtain for individual students. On the topic of tactics and the commentary on competition, when student social media feeds are completely full of all kinds of content, emails, text messages, and phone calls are inundating. What is the key component to marketing and admissions that will attract well-fitting students to well-fitting institutions? With respect to the keynote, I think it has something to do with the unity and authenticity of the institution. Any other ideas? So we talked a lot about silos, if you weren't able to talk in our first, about how on a campus location or on campuses, we see a lot of people just working in their little space. So kind of how do you broach that or things like that? And I don't know if you guys can see the questions too, if it helps for you to read those.
Able to see that. Should it be in the webinar chat?
Yeah, maybe I can just see it.
Oh, hold on. Here we are. Q&A.
Oh, yeah.
Marcus Daniel Jones. Thank you. Do any of you want to start?
I would just refer back to branding, honestly, and collaborating with other departments. So in communicating to attract well-fitting students, it's critical that you know what your brand is and you know how to communicate your brand. You've developed those brand pillars. You've developed your key messages, and those are authentic. They're based on research. They're based on communication that you've had with your alumni, your faculty, your current students, all of those stakeholders that have experienced your brand for themselves. So it's imperative that you start there and that you take that brand and you educate. You make sure your internal audiences, number one, they agree with what the brand says, with what you've developed and your key messages and your brand pillars. And you have to ensure that they are on the same page. Every one of those areas across campus, everybody needs to be, we always say, singing off out of the same page in the hymnal, right? Who uses hymnals anymore? Anyway, we always make sure that that is going on because our internal customers are obviously always speaking to the brand. And so in order to find those best fitting, you have to be authentic about who you are and how you can meet the needs and desires of that target audience. And then you have to get your students and alumni to help you carry the brand in their own words, because authenticity is everything, right? And our students, our prospective students in particular, they can smell a campaign a mile away, right? And that's where social media comes in as well. I feel like we can be very authentic on social media. But again, you have to be sure to carry all your key messages into your social media as well. And getting alumni and students to talk to those key messages that relate your brand and communicate your brand is a key component. So
Yeah,
that's what I have.
I think that's great, Paula. And I would just probably add to that. For us, I completely agree. It's about trying to find a way to be distinctive from all the noise. And to me, the only real way to do that is to be authentic about who you are. And then just sort of the other component of the question that I was thinking about as you were answering is using data to help inform where you're targeting so that you're getting those best fit students. And that's another place that Capture really helps us, right? Like with the enroll part of it in helping us really understand, okay, this particular pocket of advertising is not been as effective to recruit best fit students. So how can we focus our energies on places that are and getting our name out there earlier so that when they are inundated with all that information, when they're juniors and seniors, they have at least a platform of understanding of who the institution is.
I would hop on with that as well. So as it turns out, of course, Fordham is a Jesuit institute, and always has been. And one of the questions that I've often had to ask myself and my colleagues, how do we compete in a heavily secularized society, or in perhaps one of the most secular cities on earth. And I think some of the messaging, we basically, we know who we've always been. We're also currently doing some research for something of a rebrand. We're staying Catholic, but it's kind of about finding what it is that the messaging that is core to our central identity and always has been and should not change, and also what is attractive to the current population. How can we meet them where they are without sacrificing our own values? But I appreciate you both saying authenticity of brand, because I think it also relieves the pressure of having to be very clever. We don't have to be very clever. We just have to show up as ourselves and listen to the population.
Yeah, absolutely. So that also, like, so in my head, I'm not a marketer. So I hear, we're going to hit digital spaces, the times have changed. But if we all start using digital spaces, authenticity being how to kind of differentiate yourself. But are there any kind of like tips and tricks? I'm kind of new to marketing at my new college. And like, what are these like ways that I can ensure that I stay on brand, that, it makes sense for the institution? Like kind of where do you guys get started as someone kind of new and thinking of these things as the times change?
Just really quickly, I want to ask for our audience, because we have 72 attendees right now, and what I can see is a list of lovely names, but I'm not sure what each of these people do. So I don't want to be speaking in an echo chamber. Are most of our audience working in the marketing space currently?
Yep.
Okay.
At higher ed institutions.
And I would lead with brand voice documents and brand voice standardization. And Leanne and Paula, I bet you both do that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yes, we all have the brand platform it's on a bulletin board somewhere in our office, and we've scattered that across campus. All the admissions counselors have it with them every day, just trying to live out the brand of because there's a lot of work that goes into determining what that brand is,
Right.
And finding something cohesive to use to articulate it.
Right.
And other than, because in my past institution, I watched the silos situation, and we did always have kind of this like, oh, I didn't know marketing was talking about this that we had going on this weekend, or that kind of stuff. Is there a good way to, you've shown the college what the brand is. How can you also then collaborate with those other departments to let them know what's kind of going on, how they can use the right verbiage, the right voice, all of that kind of stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Anyone want to take that one on?
So we work hand in hand, of course, with admissions and with advancement. And at a smaller university, I think that may be a little easier. I don't know, but we meet with them on a regular basis. We're starting a campaign, for instance, with our advancement team, and so as a result, we collectively work together to develop a communication and marketing plan that goes along with their overall plan for fundraising. And so being able to speak into those plans, same thing with admissions, being able to speak into those collaborations when we're planning out the comm flow for next year, or looking at a new audience that we want to address specifically. Just having that time together and not allowing silos to happen. It's just critical for the advancement of our universities that we somehow can break down those silos, because you've got to all be speaking from the same brand guide. And I think for me, I found it's easy to forget that, oh, we have new people here all the time, right? And
All the time.
I just went through a brand presentation with some new admissions counselors, and they were like, oh my gosh, this is great. I had forgotten. I haven't talked through this with them. And so I think it's essential for us to figure out a way to keep that continually going, and not necessarily a brand refresh, but a brand continuation, to continue that messaging and to keep it top of mind for our admissions counselors and for our faculty, because there's change there as well, and for our staff, especially our frontline staff.
Yeah. I
I
always say that, it's important in whatever position you're in an organization to understand what you're good at and what you enjoy and what you need to allow someone else who's good at it to do. And so my best advice would be find the person on your team. If it's not you, find the person on your team who has that personality and that drive to be with other people on campus, constantly pushing it, because you can't ever let up on the gas. Like you said, because there's new people that come in, there are new opportunities. And so in my case, it's our director of marketing is such a great brand ambassador. And so just allowing him to do that, and everyone on campus loves him. And so that helps, people embrace the things from people that they enjoy working with, right? So if you can be that person, maybe you don't have time to be that person, but I would just recommend whatever seat you're in, find somebody that can do that for your institution, and it'll raise all the tides.
That's great.
That is great. I actually, as soon as you said like, oh, we meet with the new admissions counselors, we talk about branding, I feel like that was like for me. I thought that would have been so helpful when I was admissions counselor, because if that's how you start out, is this is the school that you work for now, this is our brand, and this is how we talk about it, like that's boots on the ground. Those are the people that are talking to everybody. So that is super, super important. And I really like that. You guys are like hot in this chat. So I work in a graduate admissions, but we work closely with the marketing team. I work with online admissions, creating some of the messaging, but we have a company that does most of our marketing for us. So this, for all three of you, this is very much how Capture works with your marketing team, because we are doing some things, you are doing some things. So how does that work? Have you ever had a situation where you're like, Capture, I already sent that email? Because I don't think you have, but if you have, how did we work through that? How did those outside vendors, work with all these internal teams?
Definitely need a central point to be managing. We're relatively new with Capture. We're very happy to work with you. But we have a portfolio of a couple of vendors and partners, and we also have timed emails and triggered emails that are going out through other platforms. And so we've kind of had to map it all out and identify where there were any points of overlap and then fix it. And then, I mean, it's kind of that you definitely need somebody. And this is one recommendation that I would make to any of you that are outsourcing your marketing materials. Actually, I really mean this. If you could take anything away from me today. So I'm working also on an MBA here at Fordham, which has been interesting because I've gone through their funnel to see, what is the onboarding experience like for a student. How do we get massaged through the bottom of the funnel? Now, I was a sure thing no matter what, but still, when I get those emails to finish my application, but I can't find a link to open up my application, I'm thinking, oh, I better change that for our students. Sorry, your question, the last question.
Yes. So, so how do you collaborate when you have all these outside vendors, just to make sure that you still have this concise brand? You're not, like you said, overlapping and things like that. How do you have a good relationship with them?
Right. So, and this is the point that I wanted to make, the driving point, because we just went to a seminar with a bunch of consultants. So we're also utilizing EAB. We've worked with a couple of other organizations. Even if you don't have the capacity to be doing your own in-house marketing, your marketing literacy, that you understand what it is that you're paying them to do for you, is going to give you the ROI. Not because, and let me say, I believe that most people show up every day and want to do a good job. I also think that it's human nature to cut corners when possible. And so in order for you to also hold your vendors accountable, you have to understand what it is that they're doing. And you can probably learn that in a quick crash course, some of what we're teaching you today. But it will also help with your reporting. So when you're talking to your dean and you need more money, if you can produce some quick infographics, even in Canva, something simple, your data literacy, And again, I know everyone's busy and everyone's strapped and likely under-resourced. But I promise you that just a few extra hours of time learning what it is that your marketing reps are doing for you, what these third parties are doing for you, will help you increase the efficacy of the work and the collaboration.
I may be old-fashioned. I probably am old-fashioned in some ways, and I am a huge proponent of whatever you're using, whatever vendors you're using for your marketing and advertising. It's really, really important. And I think you are more authentic when you can convince a president or a VP to let you have enough in-house staff to create some of your own stuff, because no one is going to know your brand better than people who are living it every day. And so my best advice when you're working with vendors is to make sure internally you know that brand and you're holding them accountable, so that what is being put out there doesn't look and smell and feel like everything else that's being put out there. And so again, one of my favorite things about Capture is you all really get to know us, and those ads start becoming an extension of who we are as we sort of grow together. But having someone that can say, you know, this doesn't sound like us, or having other opportunities for people to create things that really are authentic to you, I think makes a big difference in the space. I really do. So if you can convince people to give you the staff to do it, I think in some cases it's a better use of money than paying some big company to come in and do a big branding campaign and maybe like one view book, because you just get more bang out of your buck that way.
Leanne, I'm going to have you take a look at my draft letter to the dean.
Okay. Yep.
People.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Vince team of one, just so everyone knows.
Yeah, I know.
Bless your heart. I agree. Especially when you mentioned everything looking alike. I think you have to be really careful with some vendors to make sure that they are using your brand and your words and effectively communicating your message, as opposed to a cookie cutter approach that they use for everybody. That is a temptation for some of them to do. Capture does not. I can say that they studied our brand guide. They've studied our website, and they allow me the chance to nitpick everything. You know, I see everything before it goes out. I approve everything before it goes out. And I would encourage you on the admissions side to make sure that you're communicating. If you're using an external vendor of some sort, please bring your marketing folks in, just so that they can make sure that the brand is being upheld as well. You all do a super job, but there are little things that without a deep understanding of the brand and communicating that graphically and visually, you just need that little bit of just support. We're here to support and to help you and to help you reach your goals, your enrollment goals. So anybody, you know, who's on there, on here that's from admissions, I would just say, you know, bring us in, let us help. Also with external groups, it's very important to meet regularly with them, to stay on top of what they're doing, to know the timelines and to make sure that they're meeting deadlines. I don't have to worry about Capture. What I really love about them is if I haven't approved something, they're jumping on there and saying, hey, this was due yesterday or this is coming up. So they're really great about staying on top of things.
Awesome. I see Vince is typing, but I think this is a cool question too. So if you're deciding to go with a third party vendor, you need a little bit of help. Keep typing, dude.
Okay.
Answer the question.
I'm talking to Marissa right now. Hi, Marissa.
So Marissa asked, so let's say you have that opportunity. You have a team. You also have the opportunity to outsource a little bit. How do you decide internally what you're willing to let go of? What kind of pieces do you trust with that third party? Maybe when you're starting out and and you're just like, "Ooh, I don't want to, not that. That's my baby."
We lead with what we're good at. So if we know that we're doing something exceptionally well, and as I wrote here, it might be a bit dissatisfying, but how do you determine what to outsource and what not to? It's capacity and your budget.
Yes.
If you have no budget, you can't outsource at all, obviously. What we try to do is, produce what we know that we're good at. And when we do have some budget allocations to be working with somebody third party, some of my questions when I'm talking about them, when I'm talking with these prospective vendors, one of the questions, of course, is about outcomes, but then another is about the relationship itself. I want vendors who will teach me what it is that they're doing. And I think that that's a great way to start,
Yeah. I agree. Vince said, well, something along the lines of play to your strengths. But be aware of where your weak areas are, and outsource those. Productivity wise, for any of us, it's better for all of us to play to our strengths, and then to learn from an external vendor that has been carefully selected, as Vince pointed out. Ask for those outcomes, and talk to references. Find out who is using that vendor and talk to them. We're more than willing to share information about how a vendor relationship is going. And I do expect that to be a collaboration, a partnership, not just somebody selling me paper or ink. It's got to be a partnership. You need to be walking with me through the enrollment process and talking through what's going to make this more effective. So I start with, where do I need the help? Where are the weaknesses or the empty spots on my team, which can change over time, right? Depending on who you've hired and who you can flex into different places. So yeah, look for that area. Digital, for instance, is something that requires constant keep up, and constant knowledge and information and learning, and because it changes regularly. And that's one area that I've always felt like, yeah, I could pay somebody and bring them in, but they may not be an expert in all of the digital spaces that I need them to be an expert in. But hopefully Capture has hired all those people, and I get the best pieces of each person who's an expert in that area. So
That's awesome. I think we got another question come through. You guys are on fire. Functionality. How flexible do you keep your branding to ensure you are able to reach a large enough audience while also balancing evolving with the changing consumers of higher ed?
I can jump in on that one. I think I understand, hopefully, the question. I think a good brand has to flex. And so I say this all the time to people. If the materials that we're sending out to prospective students who are 17, 16 years old look great and feel great to a faculty member in their 50s or to the president, then we're not doing our jobs.
right.
We're not speaking to the right audience.
I love you say that.
We have to have a brand that communicates to the university as a whole with the alumni. So I think when you're in that development stage of the brand, that's something you really have to be cognizant of and really aggressive about. That whatever you conclude with, you can lead it on the admission side, but it can flex into a broader audience that represents the university. Because if not, you're either going to end up with something really bland that a 17-year-old won't bother to look at, or something so outrageous that, part of your alumni group is just unable to even comprehend what you're talking about. So but I think you just have to be really diligent about that part of it. And if you've got a good company helping you, a good vendor, or if you're doing it yourself, then you'll get there if you keep that part of it in mind. And then just constantly be checking that brand. more than annually, we work with a group of students, all 4 years, current students, and ask their input about the brand. And without changing it drastically, we incorporate new elements, new ways to tell stories. So one that I would mention maybe as an example, like right now, is we all know that the mental health and the stress of students in those years are a big factor, not only in overall health and success in college, but also in the stress of choosing a college. So working elements into the brand, our brand is a lot about student support. And so that's another element of that brand, of how we bring that in and talk about, how are you doing? We understand that this is a hard decision. How can we help you and be a resource?
Normalizing the scary. That's
Yeah,
what
yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
How do I live on college campus and how does the school help me get there?
Yeah, I mean, we've had visitors. I don't know about other schools or anyone else in the audience, but we have had more, I would say probably 5 or 6 in the last 2 years, of parents coming to take the college tour without their child.
Really?
The student didn't show up. And, the answer was more, well, he just wants us to pick a college for him.
Oof.
So it's a really different environment. I don't know if that's happening everywhere, but I can tell you it's happening here. So we're having to adjust those conversations, knowing that, these students are really nervous about the process.
Yeah.
And, it's scary to them.
That gives you a little bit of a leg up, though, because we know what parents are concerned about, and they're likely closer to our age. I mean, good for you. I didn't know. I mean, a lot of our graduate students are current teachers, I wanted to hop on this as well about being flexible. The good news is, like when we spoke about authenticity, and I don't want to be kind of hippy-dippy about this, but I think it's a real thing. In a modern evolving society, the members of your constituency, your new staff members, your current students, they're bringing new information to you. So I think it's easily identifiable. You can do it in a very scientific way if you want to do brand health surveys and things like that, which are encouraged if you have the capacity to do them. But sometimes just listening and talking to students, maybe even just 10 years ago, all of our advertisements were of older white men in front of classrooms. And that's just not a modern take on life, and not that it should be. But even the Catholic Church, without getting political here on that, even that over time, over hundreds of years, evolved its messaging to evolve with the cultural and social landscape. And so I think your brand does that, maybe not automatically, but if you're paying attention, it will.
I love that. You guys are brilliant. All right. I know we're coming up on time. I want to make sure I got everyone else's questions in here. Okay. I have a question just because of myself and talking to my friends that are still in enrollment services and things like that. How much of marketing is still pushing students to utilize the website over pushing students to come to campus post-pandemic? Are we still doing pre-pandemic or pandemic messaging where we're doing a lot of visits, virtual visits, virtual talks, things like that? Or should we be moving our messaging back to getting students on campus where, especially at the grad or undergraduate level, we find that often if someone gets their feet on the ground there, that kind of is a deciding factor for them. So have you guys started to go back to post or pre-pandemic kind of on campus marketing sort of messaging, or are you still offering a lot of virtual?
We push toward the campus visit, because like you said, once they get here, they're more likely, to enroll. And so I think those are key to getting the real feel for your brand, to getting that full sensory experience of your brand. I think is key. I think the difference from the pandemic is that there's still an expectation to offer some virtual pieces to what's the word, enrich or add to the in-person experience. I think now that they know we can do it, they expect it. And
Yeah.
so, and making it more accessible to them and at times, in places, that are, more flexible, and available wherever they are is key. So I think it's more of a hybrid approach anymore.
Here to stay.
But we're still pushing for that campus visit.
Yeah, I agree, Paula. We're the same. You know, and Kat, just back to your, you know, the original part of that question, you also mentioned, you know, pushing them to the web. Whoever
Yeah.
thought QR codes were going to come back? I thought
Right.
QR codes were dead. And,
Right.
you know, so now we have all of those out there that are also pushing toward the web, but we do want people on campus. And so it feels like as marketing has changed over the course of the, you know, the 20 plus years, I won't say how many I've been in this business, that it's never a do this in replacement of this. It feels a lot like more. And so that's to me where it gets really hard. I always say anyone can be a good marketer if they have an unlimited budget and unlimited resources, but it's trying to figure out what are the most important outcomes you want. And for us, it's getting them on campus, feet on the ground on the campus.
Yeah.
Yep.
We,
It's
we
just
are virtual. We are 85 to 90% virtual open houses. And it's interesting to hear this from each of you. And I've observed how my colleagues across the street, Fordham has a number of graduate schools, and also our undergrad. With our working professional population, if they can meet us online at 6 p.m., it's easier for them. And some of them show up with the baby on their lap, you know. But I think, you know, a Saturday session would be great. Also, just to make real human relationships. But currently our practice, and we've been finding success with it, has been virtual. And it's a thing that we hadn't been able to offer for too long before the pandemic.
Yeah. You know, I would agree for our graduate programs, particularly our online graduate programs, virtual is key. I mean, that you've got to go that direction for the very reason you said, you know, that mom who just got off work and still has to pick up her kid from daycare and then is bringing the child with them to the virtual session. You've got to make it convenient for them. Yeah.
What's funny is I want to give this quick example from graduate school across the street. So basically, I'm part of this professional MBA program. I just began, and they offered only virtual sessions for some classes. So a lot of us registered, and it so happens that a lot of us are based somewhere nearby in Manhattan. So half the room is showing up in person. We've rented a room. And so the
Oh,
professor even thought, wow, we should figure out what this really means and looks like. Because and it's worth knowing and reminding ourselves also so that we don't feel this immense pressure that this is still a new world that we're
mhm.
figuring out how to navigate. So this semi-post, this post-pandemic, pre-apocalyptic thing we're experiencing currently, you know, should we be on site or not? I think it's a good question, and I don't know that there's a uniform answer, but I appreciate hearing your perspectives.
Yeah. I love that example, Vince.
It's weird.
I keep that in the back of my mind. People are craving relationships though. And when you're going through something transformational like a degree, you know, you want to know that you're going through it with other people and those other people can be resources for you, right? And it's easier to develop those resources in person than online. So it makes sense. I'm so glad you brought that up, that shared that.
Thank you.
Great.
Well, that brings us right back to how it's kind of flexing your brand again, right? You know, we went through this pandemic. We all decided how to figure out how to make it online. Does it still make sense to do those things? And marketing to whether your school's doing it is very much important for you guys and your work. So we appreciate all that you guys do for that. I think I only have time for one last question. So, I'm just gonna hit you guys with this one because I feel like it's important. So what ethical considerations do you take into account when in your marketing practices in regards to education? You're in higher ed and you're talking to students and parents. What are those ethical considerations when you're creating those campaigns? That's a really heavy. I
Interesting.
really hit you with a hard one.
That's a good one, Kat. I mean, I think first and foremost, I mean, we've used the word authentic a lot today. I think particularly in photography, it's a challenge because you want to show the reality of what your institution looks like demographically. And you know, it's also a balance of making sure that your underrepresented populations don't feel like you're only coming to them to have their picture made because they're in a different demographic. So we are constantly thinking through that, how we can be mindful of that and create a welcoming opportunity for all of our students that really does represent who we are as an institution. And then I think, again, that authentic part of it is if you overpromise or represent something that isn't really accurate about your institution during the admissions and marketing process, and that student gets here, the likelihood of retaining them it significantly decreases. So you're really not doing yourself any favors by trying to be something that you're not. So it's, to me, it's very critical to make sure that if you're putting it out there, you know what's standing behind it is accurate and authentic. And if it's not, figure out a way to put it out there differently.
I love that.
Those are my two big ones. But yeah, there's a lot to think through for sure.
I
Yeah.
heartily agree with everything Leanne just said. We experience the same things and want to be welcoming, you know, to a broad range of people. And it's important to reflect who we are, but also make people feel comfortable. But don't overpromise what you can't deliver. Yeah.
I think about ADA compliance in all of our communications and making sure that things that would otherwise not be easily seeable or hearable become that whenever possible. Also, one thing I wanted to put in the room, you know, when I survey what we look like in Banner versus when I survey what my social media following looks like, you know, 30% here in New York City of my followers are of our followers are non-binary. And what does that mean for us as an institute? How do we become approachable without being too heavy-handed with that? So we've started to use pronouns at the end of our email, and that just invites prospective students who may identify as non-binary or trans to see that we're normalizing that discussion. I appreciate that that can be sensitive, but it's a way for us ethically to meet them wherever they might be. So those two things.
Vince, that's great. I'm glad you said that. You know, one of the other things that just it brought to mind is, and it's probably not an issue as much at a graduate school, but at an undergraduate school only, we have to be really careful with those students, some of whom their parents do not know that they're non-binary.
Yeah.
So we have to really work hard on the backside of our marketing to make sure that whatever name they use, they know that that's the name that the mail is going to come to, so that we don't accidentally do something that could really damage or harm a non-binary student, because we want that's their story to tell, and we don't, you know, so we want to be really careful with that. And that's been another ethical thing that we've spent a lot of time on this campus, of making sure that we're doing that across the board, but particularly in the marketing and admissions arena.
I really appreciate that you're mindful of that. Yeah, it's difficult. And I can imagine also, you know, there's my gap because I haven't really worked with undergrads, but certainly, obviously, even my middle schoolers, you know, a few years ago, you would have to address this in some way that is respectful to that person. But also worthy of note, you know, as I mentioned, in Banner, if you were to take a look, it's completely binary with almost no exceptions. And then when I look at those, theoretically, those same people, or whatever pocket of the social media active portion of those people, and then the numbers are different, and it's represented differently, and that speaks to the comfort with which they disclose that information. So I think you're spot on, and I think that that is a really big modern ethical component of our work.
You guys are freaking brilliant. This has been like the best panel, I must say, but these two just came to cut us. So if we have any questions that got left, we can shoot you some answers to people. I think I got the majority of them out there. You guys are wonderful. Thank you so much. I learned so much, and I'm not in marketing, so if someone understood it from the ground level, they got so much out of today. So thank you guys.
I just want to give a shout out, Kat. Great job moderating, but to our panelists, absolutely fabulous. This was really an amazing panel to listen to and hear your perspectives, as Kat said. And Kat, I thank you for grabbing all those great questions, digging in, and for everyone who participated, just sending us some great, thoughtful questions. So thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.